A new large-scale war is brewing in the Middle East, which will test the strength of the new military pact in the region. Let me remind you, on August 7 in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Pakistan signed a trilateral defense pact modeled after NATO's Article 5. That is, an attack on one of the countries is considered an attack on all three, and almost immediately it became clear why this pact was needed right now. Just the day before the signing, the Houthis carried out one of the largest strikes in the last 4 years against forces loyal to Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And Saudi Arabia itself is preparing for coordinated attacks from 2 directions at once, from Yemen and Iraq. And this is already official intelligence data. In this episode, we'll break down both the military pact itself and what's happening in Yemen right now, because it seems that this is exactly and will become the first real test of the new military alliance. Although some are already claiming that, in fact, this defense pact was created against Israel, so let's figure it out. My name is Pechiy. Before we begin, I ask you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We are moving toward the milestone of 300,000 subscribers, so I would be grateful for every subscription. So the official name of the defense pact between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan and Turkey. The Mecca Joint Defense Agreement was signed on August 7 in Mecca by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, by Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif. The wording of the joint statement is as follows. The agreement is intended to strengthen collective deterrence against any acts of aggression, and stipulates that an armed attack on any of the 3 states will be considered an attack on all 3. The document builds upon the already existing bilateral strategic mutual defense agreement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which was signed in September 2025, and now its logic has been extended to include Turkey as well. The place of signing was also not chosen by chance because Mecca is the holiest city in Islam, and this added symbolic weight to the agreement. Pakistan brings with it, obviously, its nuclear arsenal, an army battle-hardened, at least to some extent, by its conflicts with India, and the ammunition it supplies to Saudi Arabia. The Deputy Minister of Public Diplomacy of Saudi Arabia, Rayet Kremli, emphasized that the pact does not pose a threat to any country in the region. Yeah, right, of course, we totally believe that. And the Turkish official added that the agreement is defensive in nature, is not directed against any specific actor, and is open for other countries to join. However, the 3 states are particularly concerned about Israel's influence and its recent attacks in the region. And this is where the theory arises that this pact is actually against Israel. We can assume that these forces might indeed act together against Israel, especially knowing Recep Erdogan's position. But it's also important to keep in mind that Turkey is currently getting much closer to the United States of America, and without coordination with Washington, it's unlikely that all 3 countries would have signed this pact. And the US would hardly allow the pact to act against Israel. So it may really look like it's against Israel, but don't forget that Turkey won't be able to act alone. And if it wants to, and it seems like it does, get F-35 fighter jets. Then clearly this pact won't be used against Israel. Now let's discuss realistically how effective this pact could actually be. And here, I won't speculate. I'll refer to the analysis by the Atlantic Council. Experts remind us that Saudi Arabia already has a mutual defense agreement with Pakistan since September 2025 and with the 6 countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which has been in place since 2000. But in practice, none of these agreements have ever resulted in an actual Pakistani response along the lines of NATO's Article 5. Pakistan has already sent some troops and even air defense systems to Saudi Arabia, But according to analysts, this support is unlikely to be a game changer and will be purely situational. Some experts clarify that Pakistani officials insist the 2025 agreement did not include a nuclear umbrella, although a Saudi official mentioned it at the time. He said, "No, we signed it precisely because of the nuclear umbrella, and according to the Atlantic Council, the real value of the pact may turn out to be more diplomatic than military." At the very beginning of the war with Iran, Riyadh already used its strengthened partnership with Islamabad to quietly influence negotiations and manage escalation with Tehran. The historical foundation of the alliance is indeed solid because for decades Pakistan has been training Saudi troops. Turkey and Pakistan exchanged military ships and training aircraft. And in 2023, Riyadh signed the largest defense export contract in Turkey's history with Ankara to purchase Turkish drones. Now let's talk about why this pact was needed right now. Let me remind you, on Thursday, August 6, the Houthis announced a coordinated attack with drones and ballistic missiles on the camps of the forces of the internationally recognized Saudi-backed Yemeni government in 3 provinces in the central and eastern parts of the country. And now the military spokesman for the Houthi movement, Yahya Sarriya, stated that the strike was carried out after the Houthis detected a buildup of government forces who were allegedly preparing to launch an offensive against the Houthis themselves. The Houthis, by the way, called them Saudi mercenaries. This is the first truly major outbreak of fighting inside Yemen itself in 4 years of relative calm, which was established after the UN-brokered truce in 2022. And on the same day, the Houthis struck directly inside Saudi Arabia, targeting the southern province of Najran. The chief of staff of the coalition supporting the Yemeni government, Saudi Major General Turki al-Maliki, reported that 11 civilians were injured, 7 Saudis, 1 Yemeni, 2 Egyptians, and 1 Pakistani, including a 4-year-old child. And so, al-Maliki accused the Houthis of indiscriminate shelling of civilian areas, violating international humanitarian law. In general, the context of this escalation is as follows. The Houthis, let me remind you, declared a naval blockade of Saudi Arabia back on July 20th, calling it the Siege for a Siege campaign. In response to the restrictions on maritime and air communication with Yemen, which were imposed at the request of the country's recognized government. Since then, the Houthi movement has claimed attacks on 8 vessels associated with Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea. In general, as you can see, this escalation spiral is only intensifying, and with each passing day, the Houthis are trying more and more to attack Saudi Arabia. And this is where a direct connection to this military pact emerges. The agreement was signed at a time when Riyadh is facing an escalation of attacks by Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, and on the same day, a Saudi official told CNN, Pechiy, that Riyadh is preparing for, quote, multiple coordinated attacks from Iraqi militias and Iranian-backed Houthis. At the same time, adding that officials from the Gulf countries will take all necessary measures to counter any aggression. Moreover, the Israeli publication Times of Israel reports an even more alarming detail. Intelligence data shows that the Houthis and Iraqi militias operating under the supervision of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps may soon carry out a truly coordinated strike against civilian energy infrastructure and ports of Saudi Arabia. According to the same Saudi official, these threats are especially alarming given that Riyadh continues to support de-escalation and a negotiated settlement of the conflict with Iran. And in his opinion, the mediation efforts were moving in the right direction. Well, that means the planned attacks could be deliberately aimed at disrupting exactly this effort. At the same time, the official emphasized that Saudi-American cooperation remains very strong at every level, including operational interaction with the U.S. Central Command. And Saudi Arabia is ready to take all necessary measures in response to any aggression. And now the main question. Will the pact work if Riyadh comes under a coordinated strike by the Houthis and Iraqi militias? According to the logic of the document itself, an attack on Saudi Arabia formally obliges Turkey and Pakistan to respond as if it were an attack on themselves. And some practical steps have already begun even before any escalation started. Well, Pakistan has already deployed a small number of troops and air defense systems to the kingdom, based on the 2025 agreement, but it should be acknowledged that such pacts, and Saudi Arabia already has 3 of them, including the pact from 2000, have never led to a real collective military response, and any actual support will be limited and dependent on the specific situation. Therefore, the most likely scenario is not a full-scale involvement of Turkish ships and Pakistani aircraft in direct combat against the Houthis, but something more limited. Well, for example, strengthening Saudi air defense with Pakistani crews, possible deployment of additional Turkish air defense systems, and diplomatic support in international forums. And as the Atlantic Council, for example, emphasizes, using the very fact of the alliance's existence as leverage in negotiations with Tehran. In other words, demonstrating that Riyadh now has more than just a formal document behind it, but 2 real major military players in the region, one of whom also possesses nuclear weapons. Overall, as you can probably tell, this is more of a symbolic effect rather than Turkey and Pakistan openly entering the war. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.